Hello, Darren Criss, who
Hey.
is fantastic in the Assassination of Gianni Versace, American Crime Story. First of all, are you sick of hearing people tell you they didn't know you could be that creepy?
No, because if hearing that means that they watched the show, or actually, I don't know. Maybe it means that they just mean that in life. Like I can't necessarily assume they're talking about the show. Maybe they're referring to me that in another at a party or something. I don't know. But if I am to assume that it means they watched the show, then I'm extremely grateful. Not necessarily for their reaction to the character, but for the fact they even spent time watching the show. So that's my first reaction. But no, it means that they're interested, and it also means that they believed it. So those are two boxes checked that are wins for me.
Mm-hmm. I love the reaction because I feel like I always wonder what it'd been like if your projects had been reversed and you did this first before Glee.
It's funny. It's almost as if you almost trailed me on whatever press tour I've done. I always talk about that. I love that you brought that up because people get really interested in departure, and to me, that's the narrative of any, or that's the desired narrative for me for every project. Every project has to be a departure. People are like, oh, is it weird playing this character? And I'm like, no, I've always been playing a character. That's what acting is. So I think I'd like to think people would have had the same reaction if Glee was second. They would have been like, Darren, you're this dark, brooding, kind of creepy dude. What's it like playing this, happy-go-lucky teenager that like is a song and dance man?
Did you know he can sing and dance? Wow.
Exactly. So the idea is to keep having things be a departure. Actually, I was with somebody at the Met Ball. That was a little humble brag, I guess. But it was somebody that didn't know who I was, or just had watched the show and was saying, "Oh man, you gotta everyone's gonna think you're like this killer now," because he didn't know what I'd done before. He didn't know anything about Glee, and I was really thrilled because I was like, "This is great." I mean, if I can keep that up, to me, that would be a huge accomplishment, because the goal is to continually keep people on their feet, and versatility and variety is the goal. As an actor with any project you do, it's this constant negotiation between what you're capable of and what you see yourself doing, and what people are making themselves available to see you as, and sort of some are hoping you can meet in the middle, and that there are creatives that can give you that opportunity. This was a really good example of that, where we opened up people's imaginations or willingness to believe a certain thing about myself, and me coming in with something that I felt like I could convey. So hopefully that's going to be the thing that I can keep on going, because this guy had no idea what I had done before. So that was a compliment.
Well, what I think is so fascinating about this show and Andrew, the person, the character, is that there's so much we don't know, and we have to fill in the blanks of the story and him. And he had so many different personalities and aliases. So was that liberating for you, not knowing who he truly was? Like, well, I don't think we'll never really know.
Yeah, it's sort of a safety net, because it gives you a little more room for interpretation, and you have carte blanche when the world at large doesn't know who this person is. I think one of the tricky pitfalls of playing a person that people are familiar with is that it can become an imitation contest. And unfortunately, I think some people who are viewing a certain person, an actor conveying a person they're familiar with, they get caught up in the imitation, which is to say that there are emotional points that are more important to represent and to convey to an audience than it is like their voice or their tics or getting their face right. I think that's always more important. I find it unfortunate when somebody does a really excellent job of inhabiting a character in an emotional story. It doesn't necessarily look like the person. To me, it's not about that. that's the theatricality and the suspension of belief. I mean, I think Cuba Gooding Jr. did an excellent job. Does he immediately look like O.J. Simpson? No, but did he capture the essence of this extreme duress and fear and sort of duplicitous or dubious nature of it? There was a lot of things that he really captured well that makes you go, okay, we believe this story because we're not caught up in whether they look like or are talking like. So I got to avoid that obstacle simply because so many people didn't know who Andrew was, and even the people that did, only knew one side of him. So yeah, it is a bit of relief, actually. The other things that we have to go off of are a lot of the research in Maureen Orth's book on which the series is based, and people's accounts of his sort of vocal timbre and the way that he conducted himself with different people. But even that was sort of all over the place. So I tried to, a lot of people talked about his laugh. Yeah. So, that's like one thing that you try and insert every now and then. I don't know if it ever made it to the show. There's some takes where I did it, some takes where I didn't. But, there's little things like that that hopefully strike a chord with people that may have known him or been familiar with that. But again, you just try and highlight and amplify the emotional core of who we're dealing with, and not necessarily the characterization of him.
I'm assuming you didn't film this show in chronological order, story-wise, not which would have been reverse episode order, but since the story unfolds backwards, how did you modulate your performance to show where Andrew was in his psyche at that specific episode, since the audience has already seen him at his worst, the opening scene, killing a famous fashion designer in broad daylight?
Yeah, that was really cool. Well, as you know, it doesn't matter what you're shooting, even if your story is in a linear or non-linear order, like you're shooting out of order. So there's already a bit of homework one has to do as far as mapping out, an emotional arc, making sure that, that you're at a 3 here and a 6 here and a 10 here, and make sure that everything, begets the other thing. Doing that over the course of 9 episodes, I'm kind of a glutton for punishment. I enjoy doing that emotional Tetris. I have my sort of CSI board of like different red pins in the board, as it were, of emotional peaks and events in his life that happen. And that's the luxury of having a story that has a beginning, middle, and end over 9 episodes. Is, when you can play these moments. If you're working on a series for a long period of time, you don't know where these things are going to go. So you don't know when you can save the juice, or know when to really, blow your wad on one moment. So it's really fun to have that sort of breadth, which is one of the really enjoyable things about doing a miniseries. It's a longer movie, it's a shorter full series. So yeah, you can knead the dough out a little easier. I mean, there are certain places that I would restrain myself from going to because I would have to bear in mind that I know we get to this other place, so we can't get there quite yet. But every take I made sure to give different levels on the dial because, at the end of the day, our post editors and our producers do a really excellent job of making sure there's a cohesiveness to everything else. So there are places where I think we should be here, but unbeknownst to me, the pacing of the episode, the pacing of the story with music and the way another actor did a scene is down here. So, I make sure they have an option that can cohese with that. But that really is a joy to me. I enjoy being able to map everything out. And again, the luxury of knowing what happens is really cool. Something that I realized when we watched the final episode, the screening we did a few months back, is that, as you mentioned, we start with the worst thing that we know him for and the most famous thing, right? So we start with these extremes. And what happened, I think, inadvertently for audience members as they were telling me about this as people were watching, is you sort of have this inadvertent redemption tale, in that you see somebody at the worst they can be. And as we go backwards, I think as an audience, you're waiting and hoping for some kind of redeeming quality to justify all of this. I think that, which is a very encouraging feeling to me, that a lot of people watching were hoping for something human that they can go, yeah, but it wasn't his fault. It was this, and the American crime of the world around him, and the unaddressed mental illness of his mother, and delusions of grandeur of his father, who was a crook, and all these things. And we want to not exonerate, but somehow wrap our brain around these horrible things by trying to find a compassionate element in this story. And so it's sort of a backward redemption tale. I'm not saying he does redeem himself, but our desire to find the compassion is what kind of makes it this, this backward redemption tale. And that didn't occur to me until the very end, where
it's kind of like a Greek tragedy, because we go backwards in his life, and the show is so much about a contrast between Versace and Andrew, and like where their paths diverged, because they were pretty similar in a way when they were young. They're both very ambitious young men, closeted, and I feel like Andrew just did not know how to handle whatever hardships life threw at him. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of self-loathing.
I think Tom Rob-Smith made a really good point early on of saying that, he really wanted to juxtapose these two brilliant minds, brilliant in very different ways, but very gifted. And, they were facing a lot of the same obstacles, but they chose to get through them in very different ways. And they had success in differing degrees, but there is a real interesting character parallel between the two of them. Something Edgar told me is that one of the first scenes we ever did, which is a really magical thing for the rest of the series, was we had this scene, which may or may not have happened. We don't know. To me, it's not really important. Again, it's the sort of emotional truth that we establish between these two people, or at least the supposed, whether it's in Andrew's mind or what. Imaginary or not, it still has value, and it still has emotional weight for somebody like Andrew. So that scene where they have this encounter after the opera, even though that was one of the only few scenes that Edgar and I shared, it was something that was pervasive throughout all the other scenes we were doing, because it sort of set this, we sort of established the ethos of both characters in that one scene. And so that was something we were thinking about throughout everything we were doing, whether it was out of order or not. We were thinking of the other characters, and then those moments really stayed with both myself and with Edgar, because, it's not, the cool thing about the title of the show, The Assassination of Gianni Versace, is that it's not just about the deed itself. I mean, it's about the death and destruction of everything that stands for, and how that happens, of and how this was allowed to happen. So to circle back before I get too far off track, I'm losing it. There's so much stuff. I lose myself in the mud sometimes. Forgive me.
Well, I like that you said destruction, because I feel like that's what he did to his victims. Like, he saw these people who were successful in some way. Obviously Versace is like the pinnacle of it. Right. But, even like David Madsen, he's a successful architect. And I felt like he could not stand to see them successful when he couldn't achieve his goals.
I think my sort of general, my I guess rule of thumb for a lot of these things is if Andrew couldn't have it, he had to take it, right? So if he couldn't have the lover, he literally had to take that person's life. Can you hear me okay? There's a vacuum going off from the other
end.
Okay, cool. I'll project a little louder. But no, it's okay. I can keep going. It's fine. Sorry. Life abounds. If he couldn't have a lover and a love in his life, he had to literally take it. And I think when you think of Andrew, had to have control, right, of his life, of his story. He had surgical precision with how he curated his life and the way people saw him, and had real control over that. And as soon as he would lose that, he had to destroy whatever that was. So whether it was Jeff calling him out, sort of dismantling the control that he has over his narrative, he has to destroy that. If David Madsen isn't going to love him, he has to destroy that. It gets so bad that it gets to someone like Mike Farrell's character,
Lee Miglin.
Oh my goodness, Lee Miglin, where he's has to take and prove a point, and here is a closeted man who is having success and happiness. He can't have that. He wants to take that away from him and shame that person out of it, because it grows into resentment. I mean, it's sort of like the wattage gets higher and he's, he's a spree killer, so it just gets worse and worse, and it gets so bad to the point where he needs a car, so he literally has to take that and take that man's life, and ultimately combining all of those together in everything that he truly can't have, which is everything that Gianni Versace stood for. But you're right, yeah. If he that was his way of, if the ultimate arbitration of control is to take one's life, to literally take their control away from them, then taking them literally was the most extreme, definitive way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're on a awards website here, and you're a previous Emmy nominee for songwriting for Glee. So what's your memory of getting that nomination a couple of years ago?
I was really proud of that because it was, first of all, a lot of my roots come from songwriting. And I think a lot of people, at least in the awards world, don't know that. And there's a big group of people that have supported me along the way that know about that, and it's just a big part of my own narrative in showbiz. So to be acknowledged for it was very gratifying and really encouraging, because it's something that I really like to do and had always wanted to do for Glee, and I'm glad that I finally had the courage to do it at some point, and that the folks in charge believed in me enough to let me do it. So that was really sweet, and also it was the end of the show, and it was a love note to the entire series and to all the people that supported it. And I really put a lot of heart and soul into that. So, that was a really special moment. And in my mind, even though I didn't end up getting it, in my mind, had I gotten that Emmy, it was more about really saying a thank you to the whole experience. The romantic in me wanted to be able to have that platform to be like, guys, this was for all the stuff that we had done, and we'd all been through so much. And that song really encapsulated so many huge emotions that had been building over the past some odd years. But yeah, that was a really exciting thing. And even, a lot of people don't know that. It's always fun to mention, not for validating my ego, but to let people know that, yeah, I write songs, got nominated for an Emmy for it. So whatever that's worth to you.
Well, now, not to jinx anything, but you can get your first acting nomination this year for Versace, and you could be up against some heavy hitters like Al Pacino and Antonio Banderas and Kyle MacLachlan. So what would that nomination, if it comes to pass, mean to you?
I mean, look, the thing that everybody says, it's just an honor to be recognized at that level. But when you think of how long one has to wait and hope for a moment like this, and I don't mean an awards discussion moment, I mean a part that you are so invested in and care about, and one that has weight and colors and a vast spectrum, and is part of a socially significant story with actors that you admire. I mean, every category is ticked. There's so many things about it that makes it really feel like a winning lottery ticket, that you already feel like you've won everything you could possibly win. So being acknowledged at that level is just like an absurd icing on an already pretty lavish and exciting cake. So and those are some pretty amazing people. So of course it would be a great honor, but I truly already feel like I've been given so much that I no matter what happens, I'll walk away from this feeling really, really proud and grateful for the experience, because this is something that actors wait their whole lives for.
Yeah. Well, has Ryan come to you with another possible project? Like he's going to Netflix. So has he talked about it yet?
I haven't talked yet, but I am excited to have that discussion. I feel really lucky to be part of that, the Ryan Murphy players, as I like to call them. I guess, when growing up, I always idolized and fantasized being a part of like that kind of a tour artist relationship. I was like, oh, if I could only be the Kirsten Dunst to Sofia Coppola, or the Jason Schwartzman to Wes Anderson, the Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. Like if I could just have one of those sort of patrons And while I, wasn't even paying attention, it sort of just happened with Ryan Murphy. And that's just blind luck. And I am happy to be a part of this family for as long as he'll let me, and as long as he continues to do such extraordinary work. But what's great about him is that he really believes in people's potential, and he really believes in giving people a chance. And actors are really is only as good as the moments they get. And this is one that I'm so indebted to his trust in me to do this, and his ability to see past whatever was might be a little more superficial in front of him. Somebody asked me once, like, "Oh, is it weird? Like, did Ryan say, oh, you would strike me as a creepy person, or like, is it weird that he wanted you to do this? What does that say about you?" And I think it's less about me and more about Ryan. Understanding the complexities of people, and knowing that there's so much there that hasn't been explored. And I think it's less about him thinking that I would be creepy or anything, and more about him knowing that I want and am ready to do the work, and enjoy exploring the many colors of the human experience and emotional spectrum. And I think he recognized that I was within me, and that's something that actors can only advertise so much. So I hope that he continues to have more stuff like that for me, because not everyone will always, give you the ball, and he really gave me that opportunity. So.
Well, lastly, you're going on tour soon with Lea Michele, your pal. So what can fans expect on the road from you guys? What can you tease?
Well, we share a lot of musical history, whether on Glee or having been part of the Broadway community. So it'll certainly be a cocktail of all our greatest hits. Lea's had a few solo records. I've had a few solo records. Some of my songs that I've written in the past, whether before Glee or after Glee. Whether for Lea or otherwise, for the musical theater company called Star Kid that I've written some songs for. So anytime I do a show, I like to pretend that there's a handful of people there that have no idea who I am, no idea what my music's like. And so I always try and give like the largest swath of information of sort of an intro 101 class to me in my life. And so I do that, but this time it's mixed with Lea and the way those two careers connect. So to make it easy, yes, we'll be singing a lot of the duets we did on Glee. Which is a
short answer.
I've never had an excuse to do them before, so that'll not only be fun for us, but hopefully fun for Glee fans.
Definitely. Well, Darren, thank you so much for your time. It was great speaking with you, and good luck on tour, and congratulations on your big year.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just trying to soak it all in, man. These don't come very often. Thank you.